Does one of me have to be the real me? I think all of them together forms the real me. And why do I do so many things? I don't know. I do everything that excites me. I try and do things that I think I can be meaningful in. And that's how things come together. Yes, I do. I think performance is one of the most important and persuasive languages of change, of getting to people where people have a tendency of putting up walls of prejudice. And if I were to go into a classroom and say, I want to talk to you about why your husband shouldn't beat you up, or why you shouldn't stay quiet if you're being abused, people will say, thanks very much, we don't want to hear about it. But if I go and perform something that shows something like that and then open it up for discussion, the possibility that people will talk to me, the possibility that people will actually relate is so much higher. And I do have 30 years experience in its success. I think somewhere, however educated we are, most Indian women still have an apology in their minds about being women. This is the first step of liberation. I, for one, am very proud of being a woman. I wouldn't want to switch. And I think that unless one feels that way from the inside, true empowerment is very difficult. I've seen women who are highly educated, financially independent, but still somewhere apologetic or aware or feeling that they are somewhere lesser compared to men. And whether it's an upper class woman or a lower class woman or one caste or another caste or educated or uneducated, this seems to be all pervasive. So unless we break this, unless we introspect and say, why do I think it's wrong to be a woman? What is it that I cannot do? What is it that I need other people's help for? And to actually need other people's help doesn't make one a weaker person. What makes one a weaker person is a sense of loss of identity, a sense of not knowing who I am, where I am. And this really comes from what I call Atma Manthan, going into oneself and having the courage to face whatever it is and then say, okay, this is what I am and I can take lots of steps forward. I think it's very important to make time for oneself. I, for one, used to, when the children were growing up, for instance, I used to have a Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4 when my room was locked. Nobody was supposed to bang on it, not children, not dogs, not work, nobody. And that used to be important for me. It was my time. I used to, however, in my creative career, feel somehow guilty that I used to take off time, till I realized that in a creative person's life, off time is really not off time. It's time when things are simmering in your head, when ideas are cooking. And just like when you are cooking, there are some things on the boil, there are some things on the slow fire, there are some things that are simmering. Ideas happen like that, and you can't really push them, and it's not by action alone that ideas get born. So, me time, you time is very, very necessary. You know, as a performer, my body is my temple. It's important for me to have it in the best condition possible. As a dancer, for instance, I have full-length solo performances where I dance for 2 hours. If I'm performing for 2 hours, then I have to have the energy for at least 4, because the amount of adrenaline you use up on the stage is at least twice as much as you use up on a rehearsal, which means that I need to be very, very fit. And that's not easy. The older you get, the harder it is, but the older you get, the harder you have to work. I push myself out of bed sometimes. Sometimes I don't feel like doing my yoga, but I do because it's a very, very important part of me to do before I start my dancing. I'm very careful about what I eat. I eat what is right for me. I've learned over the years to listen to my body. Sometimes my body tells me to eat things that I wouldn't normally do, like sometimes I crave for sweets, and I understand that my body must be requiring those sweets because it's not something that I normally eat. But that doesn't mean that I'm in a jail all the time. I know how to let go and enjoy. But it's in a balance, and I work very hard to be fit. Drink lots of water, clean, put enough grease on it so that it doesn't get dry. Otherwise, I used to have a dreadful skin as a child. As a young adolescent, I used to be covered in pimples, and it was horrible because whenever I looked at myself in the mirror, all I could see was the pimples. And I went through everything from injections to B plus to Ayurveda to homeopathy and so on. And I have to say that it was only really when I became pregnant with my first child that my skin cleared completely and has been clear ever since. I'm not suggesting that all of you get pregnant to clear your skin, but I think that does play a part. But otherwise, I think the cleaner you keep it and the more you protect it from the sun. In India, the sun is so very strong that the younger you start using sunblocks and cleaning it and using natural products. But remember that really what reflects the skin is what you put inside your mouth, not necessarily what you put in your skin. So if you eat healthily, if you don't eat so many fried foods and if you don't eat so many processed foods, then your skin should be okay. I am in active politics. Just because I only stood for election once doesn't mean I'm not in active politics. I'm very concerned about the state of our country. I'm very concerned about the kind of people who stand for elections. And I'm consciously and continuously thinking of how I can find people who are not only completely honest and transparent, but who really are committed to the poor and the dispossessed of this country, who are really committed to a better governing of this country and not to how much you can loot of this country, which seems to be the rule rather than the exception by far in all the parties. So if any of you who are listening to this want to actually do something for this country and take the risk of joining politics with the possibility that you can reach personally hundreds of thousands of people, get in touch with me. Women should certainly think of politics as a career. Women, first of all, learn how to manage their households amongst the most dire situations, how to balance the budget, how to work in coalitions, how to see that your children get on with each other, that your husband doesn't scream at your children, that your mother-in-law or father-in-law get on with the others, how the generations can mix, how different values and different aspirations can mix. That's really a mini country. So we should certainly get in, but let's not do it the male way. Let's not wear the pants and become aggressive and only think of feathering our own nests and seeing who we can trample. Let's bring in all the things that we have learnt as women and that we uniquely can do, and let's try and make this a better country. Do I think dal is dying out because pizzas are so popular? No, I don't. I think India has stood a 5,000-year test. Everything that was still is. Yes, it might be eclipsed, but then the West discovers it. And because we are such slaves to the West, we will rediscover our own roots. Think of Ayurveda, think of yoga. There are more people doing yoga and there are more people following Ayurveda today because they have come to us via the West. So be it. If we want to copy the West, let us do it because the West is copying us. No, I don't think the Indian dance forms are going to lose out, nor Indian music. They might change form, but there are enough people still practicing and researching into the forms as they were, and we shouldn't be afraid. I think we need to start by telling our children stories. Tell them stories from the Panchatantra, tell them stories from the Jatakas, explain what those stories mean. Sing them songs that are ours, sing them songs in your language, and slowly introduce them to dance forms that are ours, folk and traditional, classical and others. Today there are so many videos available, there are things on YouTube, Darpana itself, and I have so many different things up on YouTube. Its access is so much easier. And then slowly, if your child gets interested, steer him or her towards a class, towards learning, but get them excited. Don't let them see it as a chore. Youngsters and older people are confusing liberation with a lot of things. We think that if we throw off the sari and put on tight jeans and a sweater, we are liberated. We think that if we drink and smoke and go dancing and party hopping, we are liberated. We think if we wear a bikini and swan around on the beach, we are liberated. As I said earlier, liberation has to come from inside. Whether people want to get married or not is a very personal issue. I have been married. I don't want to get married again. I don't think it's a particularly important institution today. I think togetherness is important. Being together, understanding each other, but wanting to do it voluntarily is important. Most marriages that I see are very unhappy. Most women that I know, that I hear of, that I counsel, are in marriages where they would happily get out if they had security, financial security for themselves and for their children, and if they weren't so afraid of society. That's not a reason to get married. Ask yourself why you want to get married. Do you want to get married because your parents want a son-in-law or your parents want a daughter-in-law? I have so many people who come and say, it's time to get married because my mother is getting old and I need somebody to help in the house. easier to get a servant than to actually ladle yourself with a wife. So ask yourself why you are doing it. Anything done as a fad is probably not such a good idea. Anything done because you truly believe in it, great.